My name is Russ Lesko, and I'm a senior business consultant with Macola. And I want to certainly thank you for joining me on this Friday morning to continue, in fact, conclude our tour of Macola 10. Where we have been so far is looking at the four key elements of Macola 10, and what is in red there is what we're going to be covering primarily today. What is not in red is what we have covered in our past 3 sessions that we've done over the last 3 Fridays. But just to sort of recap again, just to put Macola 10 in the proper perspective, that 4 main elements of the solution are represented on this page. One being Core ERP functionality. Our first session covered quite a bit on the manufacturing and distribution modules, the newest and latest technology introduced in Macola 10, something we call callable objects. And we did not cover the accounting piece. We are going to do that today. Our primary focus today is going to be on a second area, which is really one of the keys to unlocking the technology and the enablement that businesses can leverage with that technology, and that is in the area of ease of use, and specifically as it relates to what we call configurable workspaces. And you'll see a lot of everything coming together by way of the configurable workspace. So if you had the opportunity to be in our sessions prior to this one, now you're going to be able to see through the workspace concept how it all basically comes together. Business activity monitoring or business activity automation is something we covered in our last session, and business process management we covered 2 sessions ago, and this is another key element or a key area covering things such as document management, workflow management, account relationship management, which can often be referred to as customer relationship management. And again, you're going to see some examples of how we have all of this plugged together and working for a user by way of that configurable workspace. Hopefully at the end of our session, we'll have enough time if there's anybody who's gone through the previous sessions and would like to sort of do a recap or cover anything again. I'll be more than happy to do that. But for our purposes today, let's just primarily focus on accounting, configurable workspaces, and mobile. We will. I'm actually going to do this in a way that sort of combines, for example, configurable workspaces and accounting. So we'll actually do a number of the accounting functions and overviews of the accounting and financial capabilities of Macola 10 by way of the workspace. So you'll get a good sense of how it can really work for people, particularly in that area of the business. I'm going to just skip over a few of the other slides that we've already covered. I do want to talk a little bit about slides that are specific to the subject of configurable workspaces. And this slide here, and I'm not going to go through and read the bullets. They're pretty much clear. They hopefully will make sense, and they do make a lot of sense. But what we've essentially tried to do, and what we are doing with the concept of a configurable workspace, because we've been hearing for years about people wanting a more natural kind of work environment to work in, and not have it be pretty much dictated by the hard, firm, fixed way in which the software and the user interfaces of the software are designed. And that's what we've addressed. We have addressed that with the concept of configurable workspaces. We actually had a long, I would say, beta period with this, because prior to the release of Macola 10, we did have, some people might call it a beta version of Macola 10 or a precursor of it, something that we called Navigator. And that is where we first introduced the concept of this configurable workspace. So we have done quite a bit with this in order to make it as flexible as configurable, and trying not to use words such as customizations and so forth, but ultimately something that empowers the user to be able to take control over user environment and be able to make it a much more natural kind of user environment. And that's really what these 5 bullets are really intended to say. The actual types of workspaces we have, we'll see some examples of most of these. Our intent here, again, I'm going to go through and explain each of these. It'll be easier to show it to you. It'll pretty much come to you very easily. Is that we want every user in an organization. It doesn't matter whether you're a 5-user site or a 50-user site. We want everybody in the organization to be able to have that, to be able to be empowered, to be able to configure what their natural work experience is going to be like when they are working with the exact Macola solution. So that's why we have workspaces that are designed around different personas, different roles, some that are designed around process flows and so forth. And it also has opened up the door working with clients to be able to create quite a bit of innovation, in terms of designing, configuring workspaces for very, very unique and very specific kinds of situations that might exist in a client. Well, I'm going to show you some examples of that should hopefully thrill you as well. Sorry, then this is our categories of workspaces, and this is again in line with what I was just trying to say, that every user in your organization, at every level in the organization, from the CEO down to a person that really just works at the transaction level all day, will always be able to take advantage of the technology. That technology is there to enable them to have a user environment that is very much tailored to their experience and truly makes it a more natural user experience as opposed to something that you have very little control over. So let's look at some things and get off this PowerPoint, and I'm going to go back into our exact Macola 10 environment. And when we go into our exact Macola 10 environment, keep in mind, as always, that we are doing it through a browser. So therefore, we'll look at a few examples of mobile access in a few minutes. But being browser-based, as you can certainly assume from that, then it opens up, obviously, the mobility options for you, whether you're running around with a laptop or a tablet device or something like that. That for people in the organization that need to be able to access the system and do it literally on the run, the technology is now there, and now Macola will support and does support that technology. I'm going to actually switch to a different starting point here, and that's really one of the nice features of EM10, exact Macola 10, and that's our ability to create these home pages. And every user will certainly and can certainly have a different home page that represents pretty much their starting point in a day. And our intent is, with all these different types of workspaces, the technology that's behind them, the experience we've had with them, that every user will literally be able to begin their day from a workspace and end their day from the same workspace. So that's really one of our main objectives with exact Macola 10, and that's to enable that kind of daily environment. This is a workspace. I'm going to just kind of run through some quick examples of workspaces and then get into a few of these in more detail in a moment, including this, and especially this one, because we're going to blend in some of our discussion about the finance and accounting aspects of exact Macola 10 as we're also trolling through this particular workspace right here. First of all, you might ask yourself, well, how does this differ than from a dashboard? There's so many dashboard creating software packages out there and so forth. And at this level, before we actually get in and start interacting with it, I will say, frankly, it really doesn't differ too much from a dashboard. We are leveraging, by the way, the latest technology from Microsoft called Microsoft SQL Reporting Services. It's actually included in the latest versions of Microsoft SQL Server. So we're leveraging that because it really does represent the latest and most advanced technology to have a reporting tool right at the server level that could bring data, present the data, and present the language from the data in such a way that you'll be able to deploy it to a web type interface or a browser like the one we're in right now. And that's what you see here. You're seeing essentially the result of that, which is at this level, a dashboard, this one being a CEO workspace. And we'll get into why we call it a workspace, obviously, in just a few moments. But as you can see, it is, it would have on it the key performance indicators, the key pulse points that are important in a company from the perspective of what a CEO, perhaps a CFO, might be looking for. And this can actually be put on his or her homepage, so which means when they log into Exact Macola 10, just as you kind of saw, bam, it's going to be right in front of you, and it's going to be able to, allow them to start their day. The data can be presented kind of behind the scenes without getting into the details of SQL Server reporting services. But if any of you are familiar with it, you know that there is a main element of it called data sets, and data sets essentially are SQL queries. And these SQL queries, you can have multiple, you can have, I don't think there's a limit to the number of data sets you can actually have on a SQL Server report. And they can represent where specific areas of information are being pulled and presented. I don't know whether it's the case in this particular example, but this information here, and here, these main elements all being presented in the one environment of this workspace could be coming from multiple different data sets in SSRS. That obviously also makes it a lot easier to bring up data from the database. You don't have as many sub-reports and so forth to deal with if you've done similar things like crystal reports, but it does provide, just from the standpoint of creating these workspaces from the SSRS capability, a lot more flexibility and ease. And it also allows you to present data in the kind of language that you want to see it. An example could be cash flow projections. Where a CEO or CFO in an organization, they may want to see cash flow, income or inbound cash in the future coming in a slightly different way than some of the canned ERP level reports might present cash flow. And that's easy to configure and be able to present it up here in a language that is going to be easily recognizable. You can see this is a bar chart format. Some language, some information could be in a scorecard basis, and this is particularly powerful when you've got either account balances or just statistics over a period of time that you want to set a measurement against those values, which means if you set a measurement, you set a threshold, you can build that into the workspace, and if that value, when compared against that threshold, it's either breached it, it'll obviously show a red symbol or a green symbol if it's pretty much in line, or a yellow symbol that indicates something needs to be done to look at it. And then you have some other traditional types of ways, and this is one of our out-of-box workspaces that a lot of people have taken as a template and maybe made a few tweaks, made a few changes to that. That's obviously difficult to do. You have pretty much 80 to 90% of the design work already done for you from what we give you out of the box. Now, what makes this a dashboard, or actually makes this from a dashboard into something like a workspace, which is really what our terminology is for all of these, is the ability to be able to interact with this. Not only do I have relevant information, real-time information in front of me, I also want to be able to take some sort of relevant action. And it's actually through this particular workspace where you're going to see a number of the things that we've discussed in this series of presentations sort of coming together in one place. And a great example of that might be on a couple of things that you can actually do on this workspace is to configure what we call action links or menu picks. We sometimes use the phrase interchangeably, but nonetheless, what it means is that from any place on the workspace, it could be a drop-down menu from up here, or it could be an added data point on this particular workspace. We'll be able to configure these menu picks. And as you can see, when we mean configurability, when we mean flexibility and so forth, we truly mean it, because we provide right here the ability to configure another menu pick. And that configuration of menu picks is a very easy process. All it really takes is for you to know where you want to go, and a few other steps that is easy to learn. But if you're going to go into one of the exact Macola ERP functions, for example, like cash flow entry, then it's a simple matter of just deciding, what path that you want this menu pick to go. This takes the place of what you do manually today in some ERP systems, going to different screens, modules, whatever. You have it all built into that menu pick, so it's going to know exactly where to go. It'll know exactly what the action code or URL is. And then when it is done, then you'll be able to simply go to something like cash flow entry, and this is going to be where our basic ERP process in exact Macola for cash flow entries will occur. I'll come back to this in just a few minutes. I just want to get through an introduction for you, on the types of workspaces we have. Other things you can do with a workspace design is when you design these menu picks, you can go, once again, the example might be a CEO looking at cash flow. He or she may want to go out to the bank website, log in there, do a transaction or do some sort of inquiry there. So rather than having to close this down or go up here to the URL and enter another URL for the bank site, why not just give you that as well and give you the ability just from here and be able to launch off into the bank website. Other things that can be done from a workspace, some good examples here is be able to maybe create an annotation. Annotation is, sort of a trade type word for a note or comment, but it's in any event, what it is, it's a communication, it's a dialogue from you, the CEO, to another person within the organization. And an annotation actually will bring up, and if you recall if you were with us 2 sessions ago, when we discussed business process management, it actually brings up a business process management workflow, which is, the main features of a workflow is that it is structured, so that process will look the same and be done the same way all the time. It's people-driven, obviously. It's collaborative because you can have different people responsible for different parts of the process. So you've got the accountability for that, and you have the transparency of that, once again, being web-enabled and with the appropriate security privileges, people can monitor this workflow and see exactly where it is at any time. So this is just an example of a workflow from our business process management part of exact Macola 10, which we covered 2 weeks ago. So what this illustrates, and hopefully what it does illustrate, hopefully in a clear way, is how, from the convenience of a workspace, how literally everything can, in fact, come together. A couple other examples of a workspace. This would be more of a CEO or an enterprise-wide workspace. We also have the ability, by the way, from a division standpoint on workspaces, if you happen to be working in a multi-company environment, and we have separate companies set up as separate tax reporting, totally separate entities, there is a parameter that can be added for the division, and a parameter within this technology can also be set up as what's called a dynamic data source. And what that simply means is that part of the under the hood creation of these workspaces, besides the data set, which is obviously a query, what goes along with every query is usually a data source. Where is the data coming from? What database is the data coming from? And a dynamic data source is actually a selectable data source for the same data set. So what that basically means is that if you are working in an enterprise that has multiple companies set up, then you can simply change the parameter. If this was a parameter, it can easily be added as a parameter, change it to another company. The workspace will refresh, and you'll be able to see the actual data results from that other particular company. And in addition to that, we can also aggregate those results. So if you're working and want to take a look at things in a consolidated manner, then that can also be done by way of the feature of a dynamic data source. It will actually allow you to select the number of or which specific divisions or companies you're going to want to have aggregated on this particular workspace. So I just wanted to mention that because I think that from an accounting financial standpoint, that is also key and important to know. What we also do is up here, this symbol here is just our database for demos, but this can actually be your company logo right here. We can also take you to other workspaces, other areas within the total solution. This is really designed for people that've got the enterprise-wide kind of responsibility that as much as they try to, they just can't stay on one workspace. They may have to go flip to another simply because they have that range of responsibility that they are accountable for. What they might want to do, or what somebody might want to do is go over perhaps and just take a look at a lineup of sales orders that need to ship. And this is going to actually represent a type of workspace that we call a report style workspace. And simply because, at first glance, this looks like a report. And as you can see that from this workspace, you can have built in or designed into it, all sorts of parameters that will help you target the information that you're looking for. But there's another thing that we've added with the technology behind the creation of these as workspaces that is also quite exciting, because if you thought of this as a report, and let's suppose this was a report written by some report writing package, and you just got it really on your screen, and you're looking at it on paper, and you're looking at a list of sales orders, which is what this represents, and then you're looking at some other things here, and you notice that there might be an error, and you need to go in and you need to make a change to a specific sales order. Well, what's pretty thrilling about what we can do in that kind of situation, when you think about it, this was just a standalone report. You'd have to put it down or close the screen. You'd have to go log into your ERP solution or Macola, go to order entry, go to the order entry screen, type in the number for that sales order, maybe have to advance the screen in a few ways by way of the tabs key or something like that to finally have the sales order available to you on the screen where you can go and edit it. One of the technologies that we build into the ability to create these menu picks is something we call parameter passing, which essentially means this is something that we've been developing constantly since the initial release of the precursor, of Macola 10. And that's the ability to make these menu picks totally contextual in the standpoint of if I am looking at sales order number 108, for example, and I want to go in and edit sales order number 108, this isn't going to open up, a generic screen for sales order entry. You put in the sales order and search for it or whatever. This is going to be in context, which means based on what I want to do, I want to edit sales order 108. I am actually going to open up the sales order entry screen, and there, in fact, is sales order number 108 in full blossom, fully open, and therefore, if there's any changes that need to be made, I can do it right from there. So you saw how quick I can get to action from the convenience of a workspace, and this is really, the tip of the iceberg. Only and we'll show you some other examples of some truly innovative things that we've done with workspaces. All designed really around that one basic objective, and that's to create that natural kind of ERP experience for any and every user in the organization. What other type of workspace I want to cover quickly? Let me just go back to our start page for that. Is a workspace that's designed for a different level in an organization. And what we're thinking about here is a level of somebody who is maybe a floater type employee that bounces around in different places in the organization, or maybe they're even a new employee that's just started. They be more down at the transaction level. So what might be important to them as opposed to graphs and statistics and numbers and so forth, what might be more important for them is to have a good perspective about the task that they're being asked to perform and how that task fits into the overall process flow. They want to be able to have a perspective. We always want them to know how important their task is for other things that are going to occur. So what we've also designed is just another way in which, once again, we can make sure that every employee can take advantage of a workspace is a workspace type that we call a process flow type workspace. And it can be as simple as the one I'm going to bring up right now, which is a simple diagram, that basically shows the standard basic process flow from going from orders to receiving cash. So if I am that new employee or that floating employee that just now has to sit and enter a sales order, we kind of know it's going to be done here at the beginning, but now that employee has visibility in terms of the overall process flow. And then the menu picks themselves would be added to each block in the process flow. So you can see here, and this is just in this example here, a wealth of menu picks. And you'll see some other examples of these menu picked dialog boxes that open up that are structured and organized in a somewhat better way than this one is. They can be separated together, they can be grouped together, and you may have noticed you can also have subgroupings, which one menu pick takes you down to a level of others. So a lot of ways in which these can be structured in a very clear and concise manner. But in any event, this person now understands a bit about how that process fits or how that step's going to fit in the overall process flow. Now what they want to do is be able to enter a sales order, but they kind of forgot how to enter a sales order. They maybe gone through very limited training, wouldn't rule out that they haven't been trained at all. But what we also allow you to do is to embed directly into that menu pick a document. 2 weeks ago, we talked about document management and how documents can be created and stored in a document repository, controlled in many different manners. But one of those documents could be a work instruction, for example, on how to enter a sales order. And if I am that person now having to enter sales orders and I feel still a little bit lonely, now I can bring up that document, and that document in this example here would be a work instruction, but it can be any document created in any way that will now give that employee the information that he or she needs to be able to do that job that they've been sort of thrust into. These are what we call in-context documents, because these are documents that are in the context of the function that is actually going to be performed by way of that specific menu pick. So that's just a little bit of a sort of a description. Again, the configuring of the menus themselves. What I'm only going to do here is show you that if we were going to create a new menu pick, one of the things that's kind of key and important too is throughout our entire solution, we've got a very robust security system. It's primarily role-based, and so a menu pick, for example, in terms of what you can do just from the standpoint of the creativity of these things, a menu pick can be designed to only be associated to a given role, for example. But after you put in the descriptions and so forth, you're going to decide what type of menu pick it's going to be. Some can be menu picks, which might be a hyperlink going out to a website. You saw that on that cash flow about a few moments ago when I went out to the bank site. It could, in fact, be another report. It could be one of the SSRS reports. I mean, remember, any SSR report can also be a workspace in its own manner. So it could be a report, and they can be put in as a pop-up window as well as a hyperlink, because they are SQL-based, so therefore they're browser-based, so therefore a hyperlink can also be used to point to it. It could be an exact Macola launch. This would primarily be any of the Core ERP functions anywhere within the complete Core ERP section of EM10. It could be a submenu. That's where we had one menu pick that opens up a group of additional menu picks, so kind of like a cascading type of thing. And one other thing that is also very useful is that some of these menu picks can be created and only be available through a mobile device. So this is also something that's particularly useful, particularly as you're beginning to configure how and what sort of constraints, what sort of structure people will be able to access any of the EM10 functions through a mobile device. Once again, very easy. You can literally just take a minute or so to be able to create these menu picks. Now let me go back to the home page, and wanted to spend this time now from a workspace in talking a bit more about some of the other features, particularly over in the finance and accounting area. And I am going to actually do this from the home page, and again, thinking that the home page could be a CEO or CFO. It's going to be heavily financially oriented. So I think in this respect, it'll be a good place to get into some of the financial aspects of the system as well. One of the things I'm going to actually show you first, and you can see here there is a maintenance section here. Just happens to be the way we designed this workspace. And one of the things that I want to sort of begin with is going to be to take a look at the maintenance of the general ledger. I think we get into finance and accounting things. Obviously, there's the processes of AP and AR. We'll talk about them in a minute. But I think always the structure or the basic foundation is going to be your chart of accounts. And I just wanted to show you how easy the maintenance is on a account number. And let me just kind of scroll up to one. You'll notice that when you get into account maintenance, that we're actually looking at the accounts in this browser window, but you're looking at it actually as if you were looking at a financial report. But if I was going to take this one account, and you can see it's very easy just to interact into that screen, and this is going to basically show you a few things that are important to understand about the general ledger account system itself in Macola 10. First of all, you'll notice that the maintenance screen itself is designed in a very easy, intuitive user perspective. And a couple of things that I think are going to be useful in understanding not just the flexibility of the financial side of Macola 10, but also the structure of it, is that accounts will be assigned what we call here a sub-administration. This is a control feature. This is a true control mechanism for an account that's going to control how that account can be used in the system and where and how balances against that account will be visible. You'll have a lot of abundant ways in which the reporting categories can be created, just really based strictly on how you structure your financial statements. And if you do need to add anything, it's very easy to just go and create a new one on the fly here. If you do need to add something, if it's a brand new way in which you're going to be reporting. The other thing that is important also here is that sub-accounts, always people are looking at ways of being able to take this main account number and be able to associate transactions against it to perhaps separate divisions, separate P&Ls within a company, or even separate departments within a company. And we give you here in Exact Macola 10 the concept of a cost unit and a cost center, of which you can have unlimited numbers of cost units and cost centers. And what makes it easy from a maintenance standpoint is that even though there may be twice as many cost units and cost centers in the system that you see on this screen, you can very easily here be able to select which cost units and which cost centers are appropriate for this particular account. You can make them mandatory, which means any transaction against this account will require a cost unit and cost center. You can assign a default, but then simply list the cost centers and cost units right here that are valid for this GL account. And as I said, a cost unit is typically something you would think of it perhaps as a division, a separate P&L, or maybe a way in which you want to assign GL structure to a certain type of product or something like that. And then cost centers quite often get down to the level below cost units, perhaps a department or something of that nature. We give you the structure. We don't give you the actual chart of account, obviously, nor do we decide for you. Our consultants will work to kind of help you to decide what makes the most sense. And what will make the most sense will have a lot to do with some things I'm going to be showing you in the next few minutes regarding reporting capabilities against cost units and cost centers. The other thing that we have, which is also, I think, another powerful feature, is budgeting. and I'm going to say it in a sense that budgeting can range from just an account balance budget to all the way down to a department level expense budget. And if you want to go down to the department level expense budget, then the ability for us to be able to create budgets and be able to have them associated to a division or have them associated to a cost center, for that matter, even a project. Talked a bit about that when we covered business process management a couple of weeks ago. Then you can set up a budget right down to that level, and these items here can represent, a element of the budget expense line or anything like that for a given budget. So a lot of flexibility here. A lot of features also be able to import budgets from Excel. So just from the standpoint of maintaining them, creating them, and so forth, there's quite a bit of technology available there to make that an easier process. So from that, what I'm going to just open up here is going to be an example of a Core ERP report. I think you probably by now have a good sense of what you can obtain from the level of a workspace. But I'm going to open up a Core ERP report, one of which that we call a interactive balance and P&L. Certainly not going to go through all of these parameters up here. You can kind of read it and probably get a good sense of what you can actually create. But create a balance sheet or P&L for all your comparisons up here, of course, including budget. Again, depending on how you're going to use cost units and cost centers, you can have a balance sheet, P&L, trial balance, specifically for a cost unit, a cost center, a project, which is, if you're dealing with projects and you go, you're struggling with tracking projects and you're struggling with the accounting side of a project, we've got all that bases covered through BPM, business process management, and obviously the financial side over here as well. We will also, based on the way in which our database is structured from the standpoint of where the accounting transactions are stored in the system and the way they're maintained, the bottom line would be that you'll also be able to run a balance sheet and P&L even for prior years, even if those years have been long since closed. So you'll always be able to go back and run financials for prior years. And one last thing before I run this is this little lonely checkbox right here called unprocessed. One of the basic things about our solution is that our GL is really a real-time general ledger. We have one primary financial transaction table. Any transaction that ultimately affects that table goes to that table right away. The transaction themselves that sits there may be updated through a posting process that might exist as part of that process flow. A good example might be if I'm doing a journal entry, that entry will initially go into that financial transaction table, but it won't be updated until I go through the processing or posting step for that journal entry. However, if there are transactions sitting in that transaction table that have not yet been posted yet based on the process flow for that activity, they can also be included here as an unprocessed transaction. So think about that in the context of maybe a nice way to do a simulation or a what-if type of thing. You'll have all that flexibility as well. When I actually run this, a few other things that are going to be very prominent on the financial side of the system is going to be ways to interact with financial data. That is really what financial people need all the time. They need the ability to be able to drill down, keep drilling until they can't drill anymore as far as getting down to specifics or information regarding whatever sort of financial matter they're investigating. One of the things that's also very common in this area is the box down here called, or the action menu down here called export. And if you're looking at something like this result and you want to be able to export this into Excel, then all you need to do is simply hit that box and it will deposit what you're looking at, formatted just the way you're looking at it, and it'll put it into Excel, and then you can play with it or do any further work over there. But the reason we call this an interactive balance and P&L is just that, because as I said, financial analysts want to keep going, and they want to understand better what's behind a balance or whatever. So here's that account we started with, and I'm going to drill into that account and it's going to open up something called a card. Now, a card, we actually have a few things in the system that is somehow, takes the name card. But on the financial area, this is a Core ERP visibility into essentially, it's a looking glass into that single financial transaction table that I just mentioned a few moments ago. I am never bashful in saying that a card, especially for a financial person, is going to be your best friend within Exact Macola 10. All of the cards, and we have several, we have cards for customers, vendors, items, projects, all sorts of entities in the system. This happens to be one for the GL account, 1136. All of our cards have similar features of being able to filter, group, sort information, once again, designed to help you target the information that you're looking for. Take note again of the cost unit and the cost center. Something here called the journal. A journal is like a source code that's associated with any transaction that occurs in the system that affects the general ledger. So, they can be created, obviously, through normal business process flows, but journals are associated to any sort of transaction that hits the general ledger. They are also factored into our fiscal calendar. So our period-to-date calendar, when you close a month, for example, you'll close a number of appropriate journals that you want to close. And that gives you, if you often have struggles with month-end processing because of some rigidities in the system that are hard to get around and you're looking for some more flexibility, you'll have it here, mostly because, as you can see, there's like 4 journals for accounts payable, for example. And, we're the first journal up here, which deals with entering, the invoices for and creating your AP. You may just want to keep that journal open. And then the journal for anything related to cash disbursements, you want to close those. So it's kind of a sense of the kind of flexibility that you can have. But then again, you have the print, you have the export capability on the card as well, but it doesn't end here, really, in terms of drill down capability. You may be looking at a transaction, you want to get into a little bit more of the detail of it. Why are so many details here shown? Well, because the one transaction you worked on or you're drilled down on could have a lot of other transactions that are related to it. So you have the ability to look at the big picture here. And what you're really looking at here is the bone marrow of that particular financial transaction. You'll be able to just scroll along and look at all the appropriate details if inventory items were associated with it, or a customer was associated with it, or a vendor, anything like that. You'll also be able to take a look at cost centers and cost units that have been associated with that. You will, in fact, be able to make changes here. There's a couple of accounting rules that have to be met first regarding the period being open and the individual, of course, having the rights and privileges to make the changes. But if it's a simple thing like a cost center, cost unit that's been put in or entered erroneously, you don't have to go through a whole series of reversing transactions and new ones. You can just really simply go through a process here to change it. And again, given those rules, it will allow you to do that. An analyst could also add some additional commentary to any of these lines. If need be, there can be a note added, time-stamped, so therefore the individual can make note of that. In fact, if there's a change made to the entry, a note would automatically be created with the timestamp of that change, so that you always have the audit trail for any changes that occur in here as well. And in the same respect, if there's a need to attach a document to our document management capability, or you just simply want to scan something in and link and bring it up to the database and associate it to, or have it linked to this particular transaction, you can certainly do that as well. So this is pretty much the end of that road of investigations down to financial transactions. You'll see the individual, so obviously your audit trails here to see who the individual was that created the transaction, that created this, and the date and time when that occurred. So throughout here, you'll see that when I go back to the original workspace that we began from, you'll see that there will be a number of other reports that are out here. I won't run, for the sake of time, won't run those. Some of those you might know, your standard aging reports and AAP reports. We also have balance and P&L statements. You'll also notice here an Excel add-in. For those of you who are familiar with things like F9 and so forth, Exact Macola 10 has in it its own add-in to Excel, and therefore you do, in fact, ultimately want to create a totally customized financial statement, anything of that nature, you'll always have the ability to do that. The Excel add-in will also handle import and exporting things such as the budgets and so forth as well. So it is an add-in to Excel, but we also have database update capabilities as well. Now, I wanted to also, I mentioned before, we've done a lot of things innovative, with innovations, a lot of it based on some of these standard out-of-box workspaces, but just to sort of give you some examples of what we can do and in order to really speed up and simplify the process. I want to show you an example here of a workspace that we did as it relates to accounts receivable. Now, we have another workspace that we have out of the box, which gets into some more of the AR types of statistics. It looks a little bit like the CEO workspace, but it is KPI oriented. You've got basic measures there and so forth. But I'm going to just kind of role play here a little bit of a collections person, who has to go and do collections and look at various customer situations. And this workspace is really going to begin with a simple, you might think it looks like very much like an aging report, and it pretty much is an aging report, putting everything into the appropriate bucket. But now again, I'm in a collections mode, and what I want to do is I want to now drill down, and I'm a little concerned, or I'm scheduled to talk to the island bike people today, so I want to drill down into a little bit more of the specifics here. So I have a menu pick that takes me into a more specific workspace, and this workspace has specifically the actually has the account balances that are in fact past due, or the actual invoices that are past due. This big bucket of 90 days or over 90 sitting out here like this. So one of the first things I might want to do is to first of all maybe go into the customer account card. For some reason, I might just want to go in and look up the contacts or somebody like that, but this brings me to the account relationship management or customer relationship management card, so I can go in and view everything going on in today, 10 years ago, whatever, regarding this customer. But now I've got the customer, I've got the AP person or whoever on the phone, and I want to know about this particular invoice for $1,500, which is over 90 days. So I'm on the phone with Sally, and Sally's going to tell me, okay, what we always hear, that the check's in the mail. I want to record that, however, in not just this particular workspace, because you can see other notes of a similar manner attached here, but I also want to attach it to the account relationship management or customer relationship management record as well, because I want anybody using the system, they may not be working on a workspace like this, but they might be using our CRM app or anything like that that would bring them to the place where that note will in fact be recorded. So I'm going to create a note, and in creating a note, you can see it's going to open up a business process workflow. Now, this is a simple one-step workflow, but it is nonetheless a workflow that's already pre-configured to be linked to that particular customer and linked to that particular invoice reference. And then it's just a matter here of saying that Sally said, and the usual that you get back from them. So at this point now, I'm going to create the note, and you'll see that the workspace itself, just refresh real quick, but you'll see the workspace itself has been updated where it says Sally said. And if I go back into that customer account record, and this is the main account record that people using CRM and so forth will work with, and go into the workflow section, then you can also see that that communication that I just had is also stored there. So therefore now we've updated the account, the CRM record in business process management. We've used the concept of a workflow to be able to, or excuse me, a workspace to be able to record that communication and be able to work from the convenience of that workspace. As you can see, it's quite a bit of innovation that really tends to have no boundary to it as far as being able to work with and develop further concepts and further ways in which workspaces can be deployed in your particular environment. I'm going to go to another one. Actually, what I'll also do is come over here to the account card. Now, the customer card itself is going to now open up the card similar to the general ledger account card that we just looked at a moment ago. All the same features of filters and sorts and so forth are available to you over here. You can look at things in certain perspectives. For example, I want to just take a look at my open receivables here, so it kind of shows it that way. You can look at it in an aging format as well. But one of the things that a lot of people in AR will notice is that they have cash receipts and they have invoices that are still sitting out here in the open AR category, which means they haven't essentially been applied to each other yet. And that may be for valid reasons. It just hasn't been cleaned up yet. And one of our features, which is really right in the middle of this particular card, is something we call matching. And if you're familiar with apply to type functions, obviously you would take a payment of sorts and then you would match it or apply it to an outstanding invoice. Or invoices, you can do them in multiples, obviously you select more than one. And if it's a partial payment against multiple invoices, you can certainly deal with that as well. But what we have here, though, is a mismatch, only in the sense that I have a $100 payment and I have an invoice for $106, so I have an outstanding or a difference here of $6.50. And in addition to what you're seeing here, which is a wide open, very usable, simple two-panel view of accounts receivable, to be able to work on it, to be able to look at it, to be able to apply and match, is that you're also from here going to be able to decide what I want to do with that $6 difference. And that $6 difference what you want to do with it can range from just leaving it out there as an open amount on the invoice to, maybe writing it off as a payment difference or a discount or something like that. Very easy from this screen to be able to disposition that $6 difference, but by default, it will just be left there as an open amount on that invoice. If I kind of refresh this to a blank screen, and the other problem that happens sometimes is that the $15 invoice here that I just highlighted is what's left on an invoice, and it's probably never ever going to get paid, and I don't want to really be bothered with it anymore. So what I want to do is I want to really get it off my AR. And some people have to go through processes and steps of credit memos and stuff like that to sort of get rid of it. What we can do here is simply match it against nothing. You're not matching it to anything over here. Then I can process this and perhaps write it off very easily to a bad debt expense or something like that, just to get it out of my open AR. So as you can see from the card, just a lot of things that can be done, to kind of keep your AR tidy. And if you do, by the way, get into situations where you've got to put customers on a payment plan, you can also split invoices and have these different, now split that invoice into multiple invoices with different due dates so your aging stays accurate. You can do that as well from the convenience of a card like this. Now, just to kind of go over to another type of workspace real quick, accounts payable workspace. And very much the same way here, you can go look up an open account balance. You can also go in here and configure things or go to a detail and so forth. But I want to really sort of explain on this workspace the basic accounts payable process in the few minutes we have left. The beginning of it would be to create the voucher. A couple different names kind of float around the system: voucher, purchase invoice. But essentially through here, you're creating your liability, you're creating the actual accounts payable. So up in this part of the system, when you get the supplier's invoice, then you'll just put in the header amount information, what's above the line, what's below the line, and so forth. And what the system will also do very easily is allow you then to match it or link it to a purchase order receiver, so you can actually not have to do it through pieces of paper. You can also do it very easily online like this, and then ultimately you'd be creating your accounts payable. What will happen then is further on down after it's posted, then we'll be in the position of authorizing payments. Now, the authorization of payments sort of begins with a multitude of different parameters that you can use. Usually people use this to be specific as far as the. Hold on a second. Seem to have dropped out for a minute. Be specific in terms of the actual invoices they want to print or they want to have go out. But for the most part, that filtering screen and so forth would be used to help you take advantage of early payment discounts and things like that you certainly will want to take advantage of. But ultimately, what will ultimately be happening is that you'll be working from a work screen like this, which is, again, gives you a lot of information depending on those filters that you chose, but everything is in front of you. You can see clearly, you get a good big picture of the invoices that are out there. They actually now take the name of a purchase invoice, same meaning as what a voucher was. So these vouchers now are out here, and you can then decide which ones you want to pay, do them in group, mass, fashion, or another. And then either through this screen or you can actually go into another menu screen to process the payment. You'd be printing the check. But I think one of the nice features is that you really do have this wide open screen here that gives you a good big picture, of what your AR or AP looks like and what's ready and what's a candidate to be paid. The other thing is just take note, there's a couple of different payment methods that we do employ. For the most part, we use on credit or check. On credit is for ACH type payments, so instead of printing a check, obviously it'll create a bank file for ACH types of payments. One last thing, and I'm going to go back to our original homepage, and I realize we're going into a little bit of extra time here, but we'll get into the wrap up in just a few moments. You saw earlier that we were doing a cash flow entry from the convenience of this workspace, and when we do a cash flow entry, you end up with a screen like this, and where it's very easy now to enter cash, put a note associated with it. If it's a check, that's fine. Deposit numbers and so forth, people use this for different ways, including just batching. We won't actually force you to put in a customer number at this point, so if it's a lockbox kind of situation, you'll be able to do that as well, very easily and conveniently. And when you are, in fact, receiving the cash, it'll do that initial entry, debiting cash, crediting AR. But that same match process that we just looked at a few moments ago now is also integrated into the cash flow entry process as well. So it takes you right to the match, and then you just decide whether you want to do it automatically or individually. That's the apply to type function, matching that invoice to a payment or matching that receipt to a payment. Now, before we really do wrap up, I do want to take advantage of a little bit of this overtime here to go in, and what I want to do is I actually, as you can see here, I'm going to bring up my iPad, and let me just get it. Okay, there we go. Now, I actually have my iPad running right here, so I'm turning it around, doing my thing. You'll notice on here, from a mobility standpoint, that we do have a couple of apps. Here on this particular screen, you'll notice a CRM app, and the CRM app is a free app that is on the App Store, and they are available also for Android type devices as well. So if you recall the account relationship management, customer relationship management review that we did, if you were in that review 2 weeks ago, then those kind of applications, the kind of data will be available to you through an app. And it's just a simple app that is really designed for a mobile type device like an iPad or an iPhone or a smartphone, which allows you to look at your accounts, look at various opportunities, various reports and so forth, all associated with that account. I wish we had more time to show you more of this, but if you do obviously need to take advantage of a mobile capability, you will have that. We do have an app here. You'll notice there's something called Macola. Now, this is labeled Navigator. This app was free app on the App Store. We pulled it down only to update it for exact Macola 10. But just so to give you some perspective of now, what our new technology is now going to open up and offer for you, let me go into this app for a moment, and let me go into a workspace. Now, what I'm doing here is, just as you have seen so far today, is opening up these various workspaces, and just want a second to open up. If you recall, when we looked at adding menu picks, the various different kinds of menu picks can be added to a workspace with relative ease. And so this is a little different CEO workspace only because I'm using a different environment, but nonetheless, here's a workspace that is now, I'm looking at this through the convenience of a mobile device, so I can literally be anywhere that I need to be. And I'm not getting my full refresh here. Let me try to load it again. But from that workspace, now I have some visibility into what is happening. And again, I can take various actions. So I can come over here and create some of those annotations. So just like I showed you an annotation earlier before, if I'm the CEO or CFO or anybody really working from a workspace, I could be sitting off anywhere and be able to do that annotation. But the other thing that I can do, which is also really one of the prime features here, is the ability to annotate on this workspace and be able to actually interact with people from this particular workspace. So if I was to say go to reports and for some reason I wanted to set up a FaceTime conversation or something like that with somebody, that would be easy and that would be fine. But what I might want to do as a minimum is simply then come over here to a feature on the upper right to be able to capture this screen. And by screen capturing it, I can also decide I want to annotate. So on the upper right here, you can see some coloring symbols. So maybe there's an annotation that I want to write, in red and direct it at somebody. Maybe there's one I want to put in green and just say a good. Okay, that is, happy face or something like that. But essentially, as you can pretty much see, I'm going to annotate on this workspace and then send it directly to somebody via email. So again, you can kind of, I can role play all day also about where I am, as a CEO or CFO, and being able to do this kind of work and be able to truly be able to get visibility into those key indicators, key performance metrics, and so forth. And even beyond that, because if you were in our first session, we discussed callable objects. Then what the callable objects is also going to do is since they will put many of the Macola screens into a browser-based feature or function, then many people will now be able to actually perform all of the core ERP functions from the convenience of a tablet device such as this. So really, just as you would expect, getting into the mobility side of things and using this technology, it really opens doors that, give you some unlimited potential in terms of what you can do. So